Hello, everyone.
I'm Nick Wagner.
And I'm Diana McElintle, and we are Team RCIA. And first off, we just want to say we're all praying for everyone during very challenging times, not only for our church, but for our communities, for our world.
And because of the coronavirus restrictions, which are different in every diocese, and even within a diocese, different in parishes, there's some turmoil, some confusion, some wondering about what to do about the scrutiny rights and the presentations. So we wanted to take a little time to just provide some options that you can think about depending on the circumstances in place.
So as of today, we've had a few dioceses that have suspended the gatherings of their communities, their parish communities, for any kind of gathering, including daily liturgy. And so that obviously will affect what happens with these scrutinies, which are really absolutely important in the formation and growth of our elect and for our assemblies, for their conversion. And then we have other dioceses that are still gathering but have given dispensation. Those who feel that gathering with the parish community could put them at risk or put others at risk, which is absolutely essential for people to take care of themselves and others. And may have catechumens elect who might not be able to gather or other things like that. So we're going to try and attend to how we can honor the importance of these rights within these real necessary restrictions.
So the first thing to take into account is that, when life is normal, the scrutinies are required. It's a level of obligation, I would say, is, approaching the level of obligation for Sunday Mass. So it's not optional. And the rite says that if in normal times, if an elect gets sick or some tragedy happens that they're not able to participate on a particular scrutiny, that you need to ask the bishop for a formal dispensation for that elect from the scrutiny. And the rite allows to dispense up to 2 scrutinies, but at least 1 in almost every case would be required.
Yeah. Do you have a number for that?
Oh,
I think it was like 40.
Yeah.
And this would be in the United States.
No, the number's in the United States edition, but the provision is universal.
There, 20. So paragraph 20, the bishop may dispense from one of the scrutinies for serious reason or in extraordinary circumstance, even from 2.
So that would be normal times. Now, if you're in a diocese where your bishop dispensed everybody from everything, and even Sunday Mass where they're not even celebrating Sunday Mass, then we would assume that this would apply to that as well. But a couple of things. As we understand it, we're not medical experts, but as we read the stuff that comes out from the CDC, and it seems like the risk involved is gathering with large groups. So it's an option. It would be an option in some places, maybe in your place, to celebrate the scrutinies with a smaller group, maybe the RCIA community and their families. So you could gather with a small group to celebrate scrutinies at the parish church, or at if the group is small enough, at a family, something like that. The requirement for presiding at the scrutinies, it needs to be either a priest. Mm-hmm. If a deacon presides, obviously it wouldn't be Mass. It probably wouldn't necessarily be Mass if a presides, especially if it's in a home or something like that. But it's, again, to emphasize how important these scrutinies are. If you do have that provision available to you in your community, you'd want to take advantage of that. If you still have weekday Mass going on, you could celebrate the scrutinies at one of the weekday Masses.
Yes. And so let's look at what the possibilities are. So again, the scrutiny does not need to take place within Mass. There is an option in the scrutiny rite itself that says at the end of the rite, if Mass continues. So therefore, it implies that this could also happen outside of Mass. So it would be a liturgy of the word. If it takes place during a weekday Mass in Lent, you are required to use the readings and the mass text, the wider text,
The ritual mass
texts for the scrutinies themselves. So you can change the readings during weekdays Lent to accommodate for that celebration. It's happening at a more private gathering, say in an evening that isn't the usual time for the parish to gather for Mass, or in a home, then obviously you use those texts provided in the scrutinies themselves.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about the presents?
Are there anything else? Well, one of the main symbols in the scrutinies is the laying on of hands, right? And so what do we do here? Well, obviously, whoever's going to be laying hands, you want to make sure that they have washed their hands, the 20 seconds and everything.
Yeah.
And
you're laying hands on their head. And the
yes.
provisions, you don't want to touch people's faces. So you won't be touching their face in the scrutiny. So.
And then whoever's presiding should not touch their own face or lick their finger to turn the page. None of that until they can wash their hands again.
If you're in an area where it's just impossible or you don't feel it's possible to celebrate the scrutinies at all, we would encourage you to provide some resources for a domestic church celebration. Now, it wouldn't be an official scrutiny, but you could provide resources for the families in their homes to pray over the readings, maybe pray some of the scrutiny prayers, do a little bit of mystagogical reflection in the family. For the elect, by this time, they should be familiar with how to do mystagogical reflection. So do some reflecting on the reading in that sense. Because the point is, Diana makes this point in one of the articles she wrote, it's really the readings themselves that do the scrutinizing. So if you can the families of the elect gathered to pray, especially around those readings, some significant time, some almost Lectio Divina style of the reading and reflecting on the meaning for them in their lives at this time.
And in addition, so don't do what I just did. In addition to the readings, also have them reflect on the intercessions that are part of that scrutinizing element of the rite itself. So those the litany of intercessions that come right before the exorcism prayers, the scrutinizing prayers, the laying on of hands.
Okay? And if you're tech savvy, or if you have someone in your parish who's tech savvy, you might even set this up on a Zoom or Skype or something like that, where all of the elect together can be online with a leader from the parish who's leading them through a prayerful reflection on the reading.
Oh, that's a good idea. All right, so that's scrutinies. The point here is that the scrutinies are very important, they are vital to the well-being of the elect in preparation for their eventual baptism.
Yes.
We'll get to that in a different recording here, but these are necessary, and so we can't just say, well, we won't do them.
Yeah,
we have to figure
they're
out
not
ways.
optional.
Yes.
So if they're not optional and we're in this time crisis, how do we, as closely as we can, provide some kind of formation for the around these scrutinies?
And obviously, your circumstances will be very different than everyone else's circumstances. And so what we want to do is just to encourage you to be as creative as possible. So think outside of the box and to honor the essential nature of rites to the best of our abilities.
So just touching really quickly on what the options, first option would be to move the scrutinies to a weekday Mass. Second is to celebrate the scrutinies in a small gathering, a liturgy of the word service, maybe presided over by a deacon or priest. Third, have that celebration perhaps in someone's home if your group is small enough. Fourth, provide some sort of resources for the domestic church that wouldn't be the actual scrutiny, but would be prayer and reflection around the elements of the scrutiny. And if you're tech savvy, maybe even doing that online with all of the elected together.
Okay. Let's take a quick look at the two presentations. The presentation of the Creed, which typically happens during the week of the third week of Lent, and the presentation of the Lord's Prayer, which typically happens during the 5th week of Lent.
So these presentations are already happening in a small group at a weekday mass usually, and I know that because I've talked to you that lots of people kind of glom these on together with the scrutinies, and we shouldn't really be doing kind of damages the integrity of both the scrutiny ritual and the presentation ritual. So it's already a provision that these, if we celebrate them in Lent, they'd be celebrated with a small group, the weekday mass. So continue that if you have the weekday mass going on. If weekday mass has been canceled and you want to gather in a small group to celebrate them, oddly, there is no provision in the RCIA for a deacon to the scrutinies. A deacon can preside, a deacon to preside at the presentations. A deacon can preside at the scrutinies. It's not explicit that he can provide at the presentations, and so you would need a priest to preside at them if you're going to do the official presentation. But the presentation could be done in a liturgy of the word service. It's not absolutely required at a mass. And again, if you're not able to even do that, then again, provide some sort of resource for the domestic church to have a formation time around the prayers of the creed and the prayers of the presentation of the Lord's Prayer at the appropriate times. Would be after they celebrate the first scrutiny, a day or two later, you would have a formation around the presentation of the creed, and after the celebration of the third scrutiny, you'd have some formation around the presentation of the Lord's Prayer.
Yes. And so again, these are important rituals, and because our times are very unsettled and things change so quickly now these days, our goal is simply to do the best that we can with the time frame that we have, with the rituals that we have, and then to be gentle with yourself, to be gentle with your communities when we cannot do the ideal, or we can't even get close, but can certainly still prayerfully reflect on the texts for these rituals, the actions that these rituals call us to do, and especially to pray for one another.
One more thing I'd like to say about the presentations is there's also a misconception that the presentation is somehow the giving over of a scroll written copy of the creed and the Lord's Prayer, and that's not in the rite. It's a verbal presentation. So again, if you're doing this in the domestic church, the baptized members of the household could verbally present these, or if you're doing some online kind of thing, all of the baptized people who are online could be presenting the creed, saying the creed and the Lord's Prayer to the elect.
So just thinking of that, the presentations are a little easier in a way because there are no ritual gestures and touching.
It's all verbal.
It would be interesting, and I'm advocating for this, but this would be an interesting thing to explore for our liturgical theologians and sacramental theologians to look at. Could we do a presentation online, like you gather all your elect in their individual webinar things and you see their faces on your screen, and then the presider and the committee gather, and then because the big climax, the big point of these presentations is the speaking of those texts, the speaking of the creed and the proclamation of the Lord's Prayer. It would be kind of cool from all over online to hear those words of the creed being spoken by the faithful to their elect. How would that be? Yes, Nick is looking at me like, okay. Yeah.
Well, you need a level of technical sophistication to pull that off, which some of our communities have.
Yeah.
So if you have that, if you have that or that committee in your parish who can pull that off, I think that'd be a great thing to try to do.
Yes.
But again, this would be really, really the last option. The best option is always to gather together. And if you're in a small group, assuming nobody in the group is sick, there's no risk of spreading the virus. The risk is when a large group, because we just can't know who's sick and who's not sick. But if you have the ability to gather, if that's on the table, then that should be your first option. It's only if you can't possibly gather that use these more extreme options.
So where 2 or 3 are gathered, we can do these things. So let's continue to pray for one another, and continue to encourage one another, and be flexible, because we know things will be changing, and but still our rituals matter, and there. Anyways,
And if you have any questions or further suggestions that you thought of that we didn't, put them in the comments below, and we'll respond to them. Or you can email us at nick@teamrcia.com or diana@teamrcia.com.
we're praying for all of you, and blessed Lent. I know this is
Challenging,
a unique Lent for all of us, but grace continues to walk with us. So there you go.
Take care, everyone.
Okay.
God bless.
Wash your hands.
Stay safe.
Wash your hands. Don't touch your face. Bye.